Brought to you courtesy Ibis Premium Grade Flour. Introducing the new look of inspiration. Say hello to the all-new Ibis Baker's Flour, specially crafted for your finest creations and home baking moments. Now alongside your trusted Ibis all-purpose flour, both with a fresh new look. Plus, we're excited to introduce a brand new 5 kilogram size, more of the quality you love. Whether you're kneading, mixing or creating, do it with a brand that brings tradition to your table. Ibis, a tradition of excellence.
At Extra Foods, we care for you. That's why we always have the widest variety, the best prices, spacious aisles of total convenience, plus clean, safe surroundings. Let us care for you. Extra Foods, always extra for less.
Welcome to the final episode of The Leaders Who Built Our Nation, a podcast series by Trinidad Express Newspapers Limited. I'm Dominic Kalipersad. In this episode, we bring the story of our political evolution into the present, exploring the leadership of Dr. Keith Rowley, the short tenure of Stuart Young, and the historic return of Kamla Persad-Bissessar. With us is long-time independent journalist Dr. Sheila Rampersad. Welcome.
Thank you so much.
Now, Dr. Keith Rowley in 2015 assumed the office of the Prime Minister, a geologist by training and a veteran of public life. His administration spanned, 2 full terms? Dr. Rampersad, what do you think defined Dr. Rowley's leadership style?
I would say paternalistic, with all of the positives that come with that and all of the negatives that come with that. And in fact, I would go further and perhaps say that it is a style of leadership that characterizes, let us say, PNM leaders in the society throughout our history. There is that degree of paternalism, there is that degree of knowing what is good for you. And I think Dr. Rowley ultimately was rewarded with all of the benefits that come with that and also suffered from all of the negatives that come with that. So the society eventually became impatient with that approach and said so with as many votes. But it also served him well for a period of his leadership, certainly during those COVID-19 times.
But how do you think he demonstrated this paternalism?
Well, what paternalistic leadership is, by its definition and its character, is that there is an assumption that I know what is good for you as a population. It's sort of like being a sort of father figure. And I think all of that comes, the trajectory of that, the historical antecedent to that, comes from Dr. Eric Williams as being father of the nation.
But by that definition, some interpreted that to be hard-headed, wanting to do what I want, my way or the highway.
Well, I think in some ways it was that. In some ways there is that level of control. There is that level of insistence that I am your leader and this is how things are to be done and I know what is good for you and I will do what is good for you. So there are moments when that sense of resolve is necessary and that sense of resolve is appreciated by the population. But I think it is an approach to governance that quickly wears thin in a democratic context where people enjoy their autonomy, they enjoy their sense of agency, and whereas the leader's resolve will work well for a time and in particular moments, it wears thin eventually.
He seemed to want to demonstrate some sort of idea of succession planning within the government in introducing younger people into ministerial portfolios and changes within the party, the one-man, one-vote system and so on.
Well, yes. I mean, those are changes that, you see, one of the things that helped to define leadership in our context and in my view is what are our leaders' relationship with democracy? Democracy is a noisy thing. It is a rowdy thing. It is very often an inconvenient thing. So what is one's relationship with that? And I think Dr. Rowley had a very contentious relationship with those elements of democracy. I remember him speaking on one occasion about people's opinions and saying, well, we have 1 million plus opinions in this country. So in other words, he will stick to his own. Whereas, in my view, what leadership actually is in a democratic context is to be appreciative of those 1 million plus views, to encourage even 2 million plus views, but be discerning enough to appreciate which are those opinions that you feel you want to embrace. And
in some
which
ways,
not.
he appeared to have a sensitive side, appreciation of the arts, buying artwork, restoring the Magnificent Seven buildings. And then in other aspects, he seemed to be harsh and gruff.
And I would add to what you described as that sort of quote-unquote softer side, that he's also a farmer. He is a geologist. He's a man of nature. He enjoys nature. I worked with Dr. Rowley, as you perhaps know, on his publication. I served as editor and editorial consultant for that publication from Mason Hall to Whitehall. And I saw his interest in animals, his interest in geology, his interest in nature. He spoke at one point to me about a flower, bougainvillea, and how bougainvilleas grow. He has macaws, he owns macaws, he likes pets. So all of those things sort of in his personal space. I think Dr. Rowley's quote-unquote harshness is in how to manage and how to negotiate the rowdiness that is democracy. It felt at times like it was too much noise for him, too much noise. And I think perhaps not very much different from, let's say, Dr. Williams, where you want a quiet period to be able to enact something, to do something, but there is so much noise, there is so much activity around those decision makings. I think he became impatient. I think ultimately it made him irritated. And I think we saw those aspects of him come out in a significant way in public spaces, and perhaps too much so. So eventually it started to rub on the population a little bit and rub on them a little, in the wrong way. But I know eventually you want to talk about COVID-19, but if I may just divert into that now. Dr. Rowley's aggression, his sense of resolve, his sense of paternalism, I know what is good for you, worked very well during the handling of the COVID-19 crisis. But that, of course, was a moment of crisis. In moments that are not moments of that kind of significant global and national crisis, I think that approach became problematic for people.
Do you think he satisfactorily, if at all, gave us a clue as to what his long-term vision for the country was?
Well, I know Dr. Rowley had adapted the 2020 vision into 2030, the 2030 vision, but I don't think that had any significant purchase and meaning to the population. So those things were as a result of a tremendous amount of consultation in the society over many, many years. That document emerged out of tremendous consultation. I remember once the late Hazel Brown saying to me, who was not consulted on that was who did not want to be consulted. Is the extent to which that consultation was deep and broad and wide. But the document itself, I don't think there was buy-in from the population. I don't think essentially there was knowledge, significant knowledge in the population. But what do you want this society to look like? And what is your idea and your vision of it 10 years, 20 years down the line? And I think, I do agree with you that I think Dr. Rowley faltered. It was one of his areas of falter in trying to, or perhaps not trying to, explain to the population and get the population's buy-in and the population's consent, so to speak, on a particular vision. I don't know that now, speaking now, even in the post-Rowley period, that you or I can come up with a clear idea of what his idea was for the society. Apart from continuing with, brick and mortar development, I don't know that there was much else that the population saw or understood or embraced or was even told about what your vision of the society is. And I think, sadly, he paid the price for that.
Mm-hmm. Now, in March 2025, following Dr. Rowley's decision not to contest the election, Stuart Young assumed office as Trinidad and Tobago's 8th Prime Minister. What stood out about Young's brief tenure?
If I may, before we go on to Mr. Young, there are two other points I want to make about Dr. Rowley, if that is okay. One is that Dr. Rowley has a very intimate understanding of bureaucracy and public service bureaucracy. And I think that sense, that understanding is something that he brought to bear on his governance, his period of governance, and I think that ought to be recognized. Not everybody understands this organism. It's a complex organism, the public service. And in a modern time where there are elements of the public service and elements of our governance structures that do not serve us well anymore and that are perhaps archaic and that we really don't want so much anymore. We don't need as much anymore. Things to do with the public service commissions and the regulations that govern them, etc. would be one critical example. How the ease of doing business, that has been a difficulty, an administrative difficulty we've had. And that is because of old systems that are so interrelated, that are so intertwined, that it's difficult to extract things and fix them. I think Dr. Rowley has and had a very good handle on that organism that is the public service. And quite often when he spoke in tremendous detail about those issues, about where certain people's responsibilities end and other people's responsibilities begin, what a permanent secretary is supposed to do, what a public servant is supposed to do, where political responsibility, where those boundaries are. So I think he brought that to bear as well on his governance, and I think that is something that is worth speaking to.
But did he shift the boundaries within his own party when he reportedly manipulated the system to have Stuart Young take over?
I want to suggest that it is that same intimate knowledge and understanding of those systems that allowed him to do this thing that I don't think the population saw coming. I don't think his party too much saw coming, and I think it'll take us a while to revisit that and to understand how that could have happened, how those loopholes could have been seen, how they could have been identified, and how they could have been navigated, in a sense, so expertly and over a long period of time to its ultimate success, which was the installation of Mr. Stuart Young as a Prime Minister. So I think that, in fact, speaks exactly to and reinforces and illustrates exactly the point I'm making about the extent to which he understood this organism and this system, this governance system that we live under and that we've inherited and we've tried to evolve as time has gone on. So he saw opportunities and he used those opportunities and executed that really quite clinically, if one really looks back on it.
Quite clinically.
Introducing the new look of inspiration. Say hello to the all-new Ibis Baker's flour, specially crafted for your finest creations and home baking moments. Now alongside your trusted Ibis all-purpose flour, both with a fresh new look. Plus, we're excited to introduce a brand new 5 kilogram size, more of the quality you love. Whether you're kneading, mixing or creating, do it with a brand that brings tradition to your table. Ibis, a tradition of excellence.
At Extra Foods, we care for you. That's why we always have the widest varieties, the best prices, spacious aisles of total convenience, plus clean, safe surroundings. Let us care for you. Extra Foods, always extra for less.
But in doing so, did he do more damage to the PNM than anyone had done before?
Yeah, I think he did, but I do feel that the damage that has been done to that party is damage that has accumulated over time. It's accumulative. He would have been perhaps the most recent, the last of the damagers, so to speak, but he certainly is not the only one. And lots of things had been moving in that direction that allowed him to even envision and to even consider that it was a possibility that you could install a prime minister, and you could do that with objection from inside your party first, and with tremendous objection from the population of Trinidad and Tobago. And again, I think that is an aspect and a consequence of his paternalistic style of leadership. I know what is good for you, and I am going to do what is good for you regardless of whether you like it or not.
So he got Stuart Young in. What stood out about Stuart Young's brief tenure?
In large measure, I think when we are in the heat of the conversation and in the heat of the live moment, it's difficult to extract ourselves and see how things look with a long vision. But I do feel that when we have put enough time and distance between ourselves and that event and that sort of procedural set of manipulations that led to Stuart Young being the Prime Minister without being so elected, I think we will see that what that did was to introduce into the population's mind an idea that perhaps we do need some younger people holding those significant leadership positions in the society, and that perhaps we have to get to a place where we move a little bit further away from, where we sacrifice experience, so to speak, that comes with age, and we embrace people who are truly post-colonial, people who are younger, and people who, by virtue of being younger, bring with them fresh ideas. Not that you are younger, but you are a younger clone of something old, but that when you enter as a young leader, you enter as a young leader with fresh, young ideas. And also that you come with a certain degree of physical energy. That is just a bare, hard truth. That the younger you are, the more energetic you will be, and the older you are, the less energetic you will be. We understand that quite well, right? So now we are experiencing, and I think when we had Mr. Gary Griffith as Commissioner of Police for that period, there are many things one can say about that period, and I don't feel that is a period also that we have properly understood as yet and analyzed. But certainly what stands out is the level of energy he brought to that post. And now we have installed a 49-year-old Commissioner of Police in Mr. Alistair Guevara.
Young and sprightly and spirited.
Mr. Alistair Guevara. So what Mr. Griffith's tenure opened the window to was to open a window to the idea that we do need younger people with younger energy.
And fresh thinking.
With fresh thinking and with more physical energy to be able to manage the offices that they have and this large responsibility that comes with it. So all that as a roundabout way of coming back to Mr. Young to say that I think with the benefit of hindsight, some years down the line, we will be able to recognize that what Stuart Young's introduction into that office did was to open our eyes to the possibility of younger people holding the Prime Minister's office, and bringing with them a certain degree of energy that is required to manage a country in very, very difficult times. I think what that period also did was it confirmed for us, and I think on the occasion of independence, that is a useful thing to have front and center in our minds, that the population did not like the manner in which he was installed as Prime Minister, because the population of Trinidad and Tobago enjoys and is protective of its right to elect its Prime Minister. And everywhere up and down this country, when you spoke of that, what people reacted to was the fact that I had nothing to do with that decision. He is there and I had no part to play in it. So it tells us that our understanding, our sense, our relationship with democracy is deep, it is alive, it is something we protect, and it is not something that we are willing to sacrifice.
Well, given that our eyes have been opened to a loophole in the Constitution, the question broadens to the issue of constitutional reform, which Basde Pandey had long espoused. Why do you think we have never approached that subject?
Yeah. Well, I think it is the same reason that our long-standing regional body, CARICOM, has not really been able to fulfill its promise to the region. It is because people, by and large, enjoy their centers of power, and they want to protect their centers of power. And that constitutional reform requires a belief, a commitment to power sharing. And how do we approach that? How does one do that? Now, the People's National Movement is a party that notoriously stands alone. It is interesting to me that all successful alternatives to the PNM have really emerged out of coalition arrangements. That is very interesting, if you look back on it.
Rather.
National Alliance for Reconstruction.
People's Partnership.
The People's Partnership. And this one, the Coalition of Interests, right? Even in Mr. Pandey's time, right? You have in our history an 1818. We have in our history a 1717 too. We have now a tripartite parliament with the Tobago People's Party being part of the parliament for the first time, I think, in 25 years. But it has happened before, and it has happened again on this occasion. So what we are seeing is a society searching for more widespread representation, searching for a formula beyond us and them, beyond a two-party system, and searching and trying to, and in fact, inventing ways. The population has invented ways over the years to make that into a reality, even within the constraints that we already have.
So why is it even in that search and in that quest, we never fully embraced our membership of the Caribbean Court of Justice?
I think that is an issue of trust. I don't think that is an issue of anything that has to do with Caribbean integration or being anti-Caribbean integration or being anti-CARICOM or being anti-Caribbean. I think that has to do with a deep understanding, perhaps not fully articulated properly by the population, that the Privy Council is the Privy Council that rests on 200 years plus of jurisprudence. That is the reality. And that in a regional court, you do not have that level of jurisprudence, you simply don't have that level of experience. That is the hard truth of these things. And it is not that we do not have a vision or we do not buy in, the society, do not buy into a vision of we can manage ourselves. I think we have done quite a lot to show that yes, we can manage ourselves, but we've also done a lot to show that we don't manage ourselves very well in certain instances. So I think when it comes to a justice system, there is nothing beyond the Privy Council, by which I mean the final court of appeal. Beyond the final court of appeal, there is nothing else. Whether that final court of appeal is the CCJ or the Privy Council, beyond that there is nothing else. And people understand that. And they therefore understand that whatever is that final point, we want to be able to trust it, and we want to be able to trust it explicitly and implicitly. And I don't think the population is quite there yet. And I would reckon that many people in the region are not quite there yet. And it is because we have not been successful with CARICOM, because we have not been successful with constitutional reform. We have not shown and demonstrated that we are sufficiently able to protect the independence of our institutions yet. And I think if the more people see that we can protect the independence of our institutions without interfering with them for our own benefit, the more people might be inclined to support a Caribbean Court of Justice.
So in that broader context, I know that Trinidadians often wondered why Dr. Rowley, specifically an articulate, strong man with strong opinions, allowed his counterpart, Mia Mottley, to become almost the voice of the developing states of the Caribbean globally, and he didn't position himself.
Yeah. Well, two things there. I think one issue we're dealing with there is age, right? An age difference, a significant age difference. Mia Mottley is a much younger leader in the region. And two, I don't think this has anything to do with anybody allowing Mia. Mia made herself into what she is, and I'm sure there are many leaders in the Caribbean who would like to have that platform, but she is articulate. She has the gift of being able to speak for long spells, almost Castro-esque lengths, and do that without paper, unscripted. But what I think makes Mia Mottley into the fine leader that she is at the moment is that she is truly a post-colonial leader in the region. And I heard a Barbadian colleague of mine, Julius Gittins, recently, he said to me recently that if you put all of the prior Barbadian prime ministers in a petri dish and add a little chemical to that and a little something, what will emerge is a Mia Mottley, right? So you are a leader on the backs of and on the shoulders of all those leaders who have gone before you. So I think we will produce leaders of that caliber. We will produce leaders of that stature. We just in Trinidad we have not yet, but I do feel that we are heading there because the society is opening up itself to new possibilities. Yeah, and I think out of that will emerge. There is the opportunity that is now available for leadership to emerge that is different from the traditional role and the traditional character and nature that has been our leadership, which is generally paternalistic. Yeah? And I think that is really where we're heading. We're heading towards, hopefully, a place where we don't need to be shepherded in the way that paternal leaders have done. To open up the thing, allow people opportunity, allow voices, allow the talent of the society to come through, and you will see what it can produce. And it is my view that we can produce something that is really quite innovative, that is inventive, that is creative, and that will approach our problems with a certain level of imagination, which is what I think is required now. And just to add to that point, if you look across the region now, we are seeing that transition towards young leadership. Look at Grenada. Look at Mr. Dixon in Grenada. Look at Mia Mottley. We are moving into an age in the region where we will need to look at younger people. And with a long lens, we will look back on the very brief tenure of Mr. Stuart Young. And we will look at that and say that was a 50-year-old. And the promise that he brought, the optimism, if there was anything optimistic about that brief period, it would be that this is a young person. And there's potential in young people, just like Obama brought potential to the American presidency.
Introducing the new look of inspiration. Say hello to the all-new Ibis Baker's Flour, specially crafted for your finest creations and home baking moments. Now alongside your trusted Ibis all-purpose flour, both with a fresh new look. Plus, we're excited to introduce a brand new 5 kilogram size, more of the quality you love. Whether you're kneading, mixing or creating, do it with a brand that brings tradition to your table. Ibis, a tradition of excellence.
At Extra Foods, we care for you. That's why we always have the widest varieties, the best prices, spacious aisles of total convenience, plus clean, safe surroundings. Let us care for you. Extra Foods, always extra for less.
Why do you think that just like Obama refused to take any action specifically targeted for the development of black Americans, Keith Rowley, originally from Tobago and proud of it, never seemed to do anything specifically targeted for Tobago's development?
Well, I don't know the extent to which, to be quite honest, that is true. I mean, there are more, sooner or later, there'll be more boats going to Tobago than people. And much of that happened under Dr. Rowley's time. One of the initial issues that the Rowley government addressed was the MV Galicia in Tobago and that sea bridge to Tobago. And their solution to it was to just keep giving more and more and more and more. I think Tobago appeared problematic to Dr. Rowley for one fundamental reason, that this idea of Tobago autonomy, this idea of Tobago wanting a place side by side with Trinidad rather than the sister isle, yeah? I think that was always difficult for him to navigate. I want to say further that it's always difficult for the PNM to navigate, because Tobago is a different people, it's a different space, and it has always been in the interest of the PNM to have it as one space, Trinidad and Tobago. But Tobago has consistently, up to now, being represented by two parties in the parliament, taking the Tobago House of Assembly with a Tobago bred and born party, is showing that it wants to represent itself. It does not want to be represented through a Trinidad-based political party, which is what the PNM is. Yeah? So I wouldn't say that he didn't do. I think he did a lot for Tobago. You have the ANR airport. You have the number of boats going to Tobago. I think there was a fair amount of development in Tobago during that time of the Rowley administration. And so much so that we have to start to wonder, how much do 60,000 people really need? And how many resources, how much money needs to be channeled to a population that is that size, which is perhaps the size of a regional corporation here. Yeah? But I think he did all of that and yet avoided the main issue, which is how do you handle Tobago's relationship with Trinidad?
Do you think Tobago has been fair to Dr. Rowley?
I don't know that it's fair or unfair. Dr. Rowley is one of their own. It was interesting to me that in the THA election, the PNM lost Mason Hall, which is your home. And I do not know in the political history of this country that there has been any prime minister that has lost their home. Yeah? He represents a Diego Martin constituency, but Mason Hall is his home. So I don't think it's fair or unfair necessarily, but there certainly is somewhere inside of there, if we look at it objectively, a rejection of him and a rejection of his leadership, which would be very hard for him to swallow. And I sympathize with him in that regard, but that is what Tobago people did, and that is what they said.
Do you think that eventually Dr. Rowley was psychologically preparing himself for rejection when he found that he was brave enough to say, I will take XYZ decisions even if it means losing the election?
Yeah. I don't think Dr. Rowley's idea at any point, and I think we saw this on the night of the general election, I don't think at any point he considered losing an election. I don't think that occurred to him at all. He looked like a deer in headlights on that night. I think he was shocked. I think he probably, we are still in that flavor of that moment. I think he is still in shock, to be quite honest, about the defeat and the extent of the defeat, because what it implied in all of the stats, all of the figures, all of the analysis, what it really was a rejection of his leadership and and some of the decisions that he made, especially that one relating to the installation of Mr. Stuart Young. So I don't think the idea occurred to him at all. Let me prepare because. What I will say, however, and I think this is something that perhaps others can speak to more as time passes, Dr. Rowley is not the politician that a Kamla Persad-Bissessar is, and he is not the politician that, let us say, someone else is. Dr. Rowley is, in my own view, a reluctant politician. I think he entered politics almost accidentally, stayed in it for a very long time, has certain qualities that make him good at it, that he's able to stand, he's a stand and deliver speaker. He does have that gift, just like Mia Motley, to stand and speak for long spells unscripted. He does have a way with language. He studied Shakespeare, right? So he has a way with language. So he has those qualities that predisposed him to some kind of political presence. And I think he used it as time went on. But I think he was more guided. Politics came to him more than him going to politics. And if you read his book, you will get that sense that when he was first made a senator, his first entry into politics, his main question was, will I have to give up my job? Because his job at the time was being head of the seismic research unit at UWI as a geologist. And he was adamant that he will do nothing that will mean, in politics, that will mean him having to give up that. It's interesting because now life has come full circle, and he recently returned to Montserrat to help commemorate an anniversary of the eruption of the volcano in Montserrat. So it's interesting that his life is sort of making that circle, that we all recognize, that's familiar to all of us. So I think he is a reluctant politician. And when he talks about not being in love with office and those kinds of things, I think all of those things are indicators that it was never going to be his end, that his fate in politics was not going to end him because he wanted a life beyond politics. But sometimes life guides you and takes you places where you don't intend to go. And I think, in a sense, his political career is in many ways that.
But some accuse the geologist of allowing rocks to go to his head, and he became somewhat arrogant towards the end of his tenure.
I don't think Dr. Rowley became arrogant. I think Dr. Rowley is an arrogant personality. I think it is his way, it is his nature. I think he does not, he doesn't have much patience with a plethora of opinions. And those things will not work well for you. Governing a society, any democratic society, but I would go further and say particularly a democracy like Trinidad and Tobago. I remember once during the 10 years of the PNM administration, I remember Fitzgerald Hines saying in Parliament once that if you're not careful, this government, this country will send you mad. That it almost sent Dr. Williams mad. And that the society is often spoken of by leaders, perhaps not publicly, but they consider Trinidad to be sort of difficult to govern, sometimes even ungovernable. And I often think that it is not that we are ungovernable, but to a large extent we are a self-governing people. And as a leader, if you don't understand that and make room for some of that, and let that inform the way you manage a society and the way you govern it, you are destined, every leader is destined to end up in some degree of boiling hot water.
Well, we were described as being ungovernable or difficult to govern since the days of Chacon.
Well, there you are.
So there we go. So what would you say have been, despite it all, despite his history and his ups and downs, were Dr. Rowley's three most significant achievements?
Well, I think you can't spend the amount of money that his government spent in the 10 years and not have certain things to mark your tenure in office. So I think we've had infrastructural development. That highway to Sandy Grande, for example, I don't know if you've ever used it, but if you have, it is a tremendous achievement. Sooner or later, we will see the Tobago airport as that, I think. I think we will see when it is completed and properly opened outside of the fray of the politics and elections and whatnot, that central block at the Port of Spain General Hospital. I think those things will stand as very positive legacies. I think Dr. Rowley held on to the view of brick and mortar development, and perhaps brick and mortar development at a time when the society needs a focus on a different kind of development. So I would say one of the achievements that he's had is that I think there was reasonably, the economists will speak to it more eloquently, I cannot, but there appears to be reasonably good fiscal management. In other words, we didn't go maybe as far down the road as we could have into fiscal deficits, even given a pandemic and those kinds of things. And I think the fact that he was there to manage a pandemic, I think that was a good thing. I think strong decisions had to be taken, and strong decisions were taken. The world lost patience with the restrictions of the pandemic, and I think with clarity of time, I do not think that the global population will allow itself to be so marshaled again. I think that was a once and done. But for the shock of the global shock that was the COVID-19 pandemic, I think it was a good thing that there was leadership that was resolute. It was one of those rare moments where it didn't last for very long, even during the pandemic, but it was one of those rare moments where I know what is good for you and I am going to do it was useful.
And then came Kamla Persad-Bissessar.
Again, I dare say.
Again. Well, yes, in May 2025, Kamla Persad-Bissessar returned to office, becoming the first person in our history to serve 2 non-consecutive terms as Prime Minister. What does her return say about the state of our politics?
It says that when the society is in search of alternatives and instruments, we find it. After Mrs. Persad-Bissessar's first term in office, and after 10 years in opposition with a very strong PNM government and a very strong efforts by the government in the parliament to make the UNC into something that the society will never return to, and to so diminish her and her capacity as a leader, and to do it successfully. To return from that is a tremendous achievement. And again, with the long lens of history, we are still in the moment now where hurts are still very much alive. But when this time passes and we look back on this period 20 years from now, 15 years from now, we will see what a comeback queen Kamla Persad-Bissessar is.
Yes, to have done that, even in the face of heavy criticism within her own party for sticking it out, and then she won.
That's
again.
right. That's right. And not only won, but she won handsomely. The largest victory, electoral victory, that the PNM has ever had in its entire history, post-independence, was 1976, I believe, where they won 26 seats. And that was 26 in a parliament that would have been 36. Kamla Persad-Bissessar has come in the People's Partnership 2010. She took 29 seats. In 2025, she has taken 26. And if perchance you want to add Tobago to the non-PNM votes, we're talking 28. So whenever she has been in office, she has been so with resounding support. It is also interesting that after her first term in office, which of course went quite badly and went bad very quickly, after her first term in office, the PNM was voted into office, but was voted into office with only 23 seats. It was not a full-throated approval for the PNM, and it wasn't a full-throated mandate. And after that, in 2020, even with a pandemic election, even having had 5 years to make your case to the population being in government, the PNM lost a seat and returned to office in 2020 with 22 seats. Kamla Persad-Bissessar has returned to office in 2025 with 26. I think that is a tremendous political achievement. And what she has done inside her party, during the election campaign, she spoke about purging her party. And what she has achieved with the United National Congress is, in political terms, it is an immense thing. She has removed the religious right, or the religious orthodoxy, let me say, from the party. She has removed, and she named it, she has removed the Pandey dynasty from the party and Pandey nostalgia. And what has she replaced it with? She has replaced it with an expanded base. So you have people of all colors, people of all shades, you have Indians, you have Africans, you have people of all professions, you have labor, you have a whole set of people more truly reflective, objectively, of the society than any other, perhaps, political organization, perhaps apart from the NAR, in the history of the society. And in so doing, by the time elections came on April 28th, and subsequent to that, the country doesn't even remember too much who was objecting to her and what their fate is and where they are, because it simply doesn't matter. It's the extent to which she was successful in excising that challenge to her leadership and held her party together, and held a party that launched a general election campaign that was a masterclass in election campaigns. And in time to come as well, when we return to that and analyze it, we will see what a masterful campaign she ran. She ran, or whoever are the forces behind these political entities, whoever designed it, she certainly helped to execute it. And I think she has returned to office as Prime Minister with apology for what she has done in the past, and with a sense that this may be her last term, likely to be her last term as Prime Minister, given certain age constraints and whatnot, and that she is going to make this last term matter, and she is going to make this into her legacy as opposed to 2010 to 2015. And I think all of those things combined, they send some good signals, they send positive signals for the society for the next 5 years. And if she is able to hold course, what the UNC is today and what it is 5 years hence, we don't know.
Yeah. Well, skeptics may say that the UNC coalitions benefited from succeeding a party that was at its lowest ebb most unpopular, and that perhaps the choice to vote them in was serendipitous, luck.
I think given the campaign that they ran, I think people who voted for the UNC voted for the UNC. To vote for someone, you have to get up in the morning, you have to shower, you have to change your clothes, and you have to find yourself wherever it is. You have to have ID card, you have to have all your things in order and go. It is the point I'm making is a very deliberate act. And people don't do that because, I'll hold my nose and do that. They will hold their nose and not vote. But voting in a government, any government, is a very deliberate act. And when the PNM wins elections, it is a deliberate decision the population has made. When parties other than the PNM win elections, it is a similarly deliberate act that the population makes. I think the demographics of the society that we're dealing with is changing. I think there are many more young voters. There are many more people who are not tied to the past, or people, some of them and some willing to relinquish the past. And I think there are great and modern challenges that are before us, new challenges, before the world's population, including us. And I think people are looking for changes that suggest to them that there are leaders who are more in sync with change and who are willing to do things differently because that is required in this new time that we are in. And I think what the society is in fact rejecting is old ways of doing things.
So what would you say would be the top achievements of PM Kamla 1.0?
1.2. One definitely has to be that she is a female leader. And just like with the long lens of time, we will look back and see Mr. Young in a certain way. I think with the long lens of history, we will look back. You see, when things are happening and it's fresh and hurts are fresh, it's difficult to see these things, to see through that, to see through the woods, you know. But for this country to have elected a female prime minister is a significant thing. And what it has done, it has told all young women and all girls in Trinidad and Tobago that here is another thing to which you can aspire. It is not beyond your reach. And what it has done, it has expanded by 50% the population of people from whom political leadership can be drawn. And that can only do well for the society. And I think that is a most significant thing that she has done. I think the other thing that Mrs. Persad-Bissessar 1.0 did was to bring into leadership what appears to be and continues to appear to be a genuine sense of care and compassion for a population. It is something that male leaders have not been able to demonstrate easily. And that is not to say they are not caring people, but they have not been able to easily demonstrate that to the population. I think when you speak to people whom she has met personally, they talk to you about the touch of a hand. You know, these things matter to people. Turning up in particular communities when communities are in distress matters. It is one of the things that Dr. Rowley never did, for example, right? When that matters to our population, it matters to people, it matters to communities of people. So I think that is also something that she brought that was very significant into leadership. And I think the third thing she brought was a very different view and a very different vision for the society. Trinidad and Tobago we have been created in the image and likeness of the People's National Movement, and just because they've held office for so long. What she brought was radically different ideas about how a society operates, how it can run, and how leadership can manage that society, how people can be governed, how you can do things. It was under her 1.0, her first time in office, that we started to speak economically about the blue economy and the green economy and all these kinds of things, you know. Ideas that at the time were fresh to us, and some of us saying, I mean, what are they talking about really, you know? But all of those things are in the time of change. Those things tell you that a society is in transition. A society wants different things. And I think she brought to the society the possibility that things can be different, that perhaps one political party took the society this far, and that maybe another political party has to be there to take it another distance, because we need different ways of doing things, different ways of problem solving, different ways of seeing problems, understanding problems, and different ideas about how we solve problems. So I think she brought a level of innovation in thought, not necessarily in act, but certainly she brought a certain level of innovation in thought to the society. And the expectation is that Kamla 2.0 will bring even more of that to the society.
So that leads me to ask, how is her second term expected to differ from her first?
She said early o'clock, and she said repeatedly, both when she was sworn in, when she entered Parliament, and at the opening of Parliament, that anybody in her party who feels that they are here on their own frolic, retribution is going to be swift and brutal. I think the population will hold her to that. I don't think she would say it just because. I think she has said it hopefully because she means it. What happens over the next 5 years is entirely up to her. Entirely up to her. The extent to which she can hold that position and the extent to which she can manage all the people around her and manage her cabinet so that people do not go off on their own frolic. Because I think that is what sunk the party. That is what put them out of pasture after 2010 to 2015. People being on their own frolic.
Introducing the new look of inspiration. Say hello to the all-new Ibis Baker's flour, specially crafted for your finest creations and home baking moments. Now alongside your trusted Ibis all-purpose flour, both with a fresh new look. Plus, we're excited to introduce a brand new 5 kilogram size, more of the quality you love. Whether you're kneading, mixing or creating, do it with a brand that brings tradition to your table. Ibis, a tradition of excellence.
At Extra Foods, we care for you. That's why we always have the widest variety, the best prices, spacious aisles of total convenience, plus clean, safe surroundings. Let us care for you. Extra Foods, always extra for less.
So let's look at the presidency. During this period, Trinidad and Tobago was served by 2 presidents. Paula May Weeks, the first female president, known for her legal rigor and moral clarity, and by Christine Kangaloo, who assumed office in 2023, bringing parliamentary experience and steadying influence into turbulent times. How do we regard these 2 women?
Yeah, well, I think Paula May Weeks was our first female president. So she has made history there. But I think her tenure is something that the society will look back on, perhaps with not especially warm and fond feelings, because I think that was just her own character. She was not a warm and fun and a person into fondness. So I think that characterizes her period. I think what happened subsequent to her is very interesting for our development in the society. You know, sometimes the old people have a way of saying something has to happen for something else to happen. I think Paula May Weeks there, and now President Christine Kangaloo. The issue around the current president has to do with her ancestry in politics, that she was openly politically aligned to the PNM. She was an MP, a PNM MP. Now, she's not the first person to have done that, as she herself said. That happened with Mr. Robinson as well. So the door was opened with Mr. Pandey, and through that door came President Kangaloo. These things happen, and they happen, I think, for the society to recognize that there must be some semblance, there must be the optics of independence in that office. And the society's objection to President Kangaloo and their objection to A.N.R. Robinson in the past are both useful things. They are not things that the office holders should be disagreeable about. The society is saying that that office should be inhabited and forever should be populated by someone who the society regards as independent, although we all have our own political suasions. And that is a good thing. The society wanting that is a good thing. And it may serve as to dissuade other candidates for the presidency in the future, that even if you are approached, even if you are asked to be that, if you have overt political ties, you can also say no. There's also that possibility, and we will respect you even more for it. So I think what is happening with this current presidency is useful in that way. It is also useful when a society is growing, and in order for it to grow, it has to question things, you know. And questioning things is not being disrespectful. So we are in a moment now where we are also questioning the concept of independent senators. And people are objecting to that questioning. But there's nothing wrong with that questioning. I did not know before that the word independent senator does not appear in our constitution. I didn't know that. I don't know whether you knew. I had to return to my constitution, look at it and said, but AA is true. That doesn't, so I am learning. And as I am learning, other people in the society are learning. I recently learned that we might be, I haven't researched it myself, but I'm told by a constitutional lawyer that we are the only English-speaking Caribbean country to have independent senators, that other societies have government senators and opposition senators. If that is so, that is another aspect of our learning. And these things are important. And it is only when we question things that we come to greater understanding and greater appreciation of what we have. Because we may decide somewhere down the line that we don't want independent senators, that we want government senators and opposition senators alone.
We may decide that we are prepared to lead the way globally.
Exactly. Or we may decide we may want more independent senators to balance off the thing in the parliament. You know, whatever it is, that has to come out of knowledge, and it has to come out of learning, and it has to come out of questioning. So if for Independence 2025, this society is in a place of learning, it is a place of questioning, it is in a place of searching, I reckon that we are in a very good place.
So after 63 years of independence, of searching, of learning, are we yet a nation?
I think in some ways we are. I think, and I would go further to say that perhaps in a most fundamental way we are. Whether you are in Trinidad, whether you are in Tobago, whether you are outside of Trinidad and Tobago, whether you are in the region or outside of the region, Trinis recognize Trinis. And being Trinidadian is something we may not always be able to articulate. We may not always be able to put our finger on all of the things that make us who we are. But that there is a Trinidadian and a Tobagonian identity, of that there is no doubt. And when you have that, that is your fundamental. Once you have something that defines your character, the nation building then becomes your institutions and how you protect institutions, how you evolve your institutions. But that you have a character of something that is distinct, something that is distinguished, and something that we like, something that we love, something that we enjoy, and something that we want to be. I would say we have the most essential building block to become the nation we want to be.
Dr. Sheila Rampersad, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Glad to have you.
Introducing the new look of inspiration. Say hello to the all-new Ibis Baker's flour, specially crafted for your finest creations and home baking moments. Now alongside your trusted Ibis all-purpose flour, both with a fresh new look. Plus, we're excited to introduce a brand new 5 kilogram size, more of the quality you love. Whether you're kneading, mixing, or creating, do it with a brand that brings tradition to your table. Ibis, a tradition of excellence.
At Extra Foods, we care for you. That's why we always have the widest varieties, the best prices, spacious aisles of total convenience, plus clean, safe surroundings. Let us care for you. Extra Foods, always extra for less.
In the last 63 years, we've been shaped by 10 prime ministers and 11 presidents. Their decisions, mistakes, courage, and convictions brought us to this point. Along the way, our small Twill Island state has captured the world's attention. We've triumphed on Olympic tracks, global runways, and carnival stages. Our artists, writers, and thinkers have earned international acclaim. We've produced Nobel Prize-winning authors and world-class musicians. And yes, we've celebrated beauty. Our unique blend of races and cultures has brought us global titles, including the first Black Miss Universe and a Miss World. From calypso to chutney, from doubles to diplomacy, from oil fields to innovation, Trinidad and Tobago continues to rise. We are resilient, creative, and fiercely proud people, bound not just by place, but by purpose. And at 63, our democracy, imperfect yet enduring, remains a beacon in the region. We thank you for joining us on this journey. I'm Dominic Kalipersad, and this has been The Leaders Who Built Our Nation.